Take one seat per person in your precinct. The others you can't take home.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I did it twice.
Your attention, please. Will you keep it silent so I can hear the attendance call? Precinct 1.
7.
Precinct 1 has 7. Precinct 2. 18. Precinct 2 is 18. What? Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 12. Precinct 4. How many? Precinct 4 rings in at 15. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 8. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 15. Precinct 7. Precinct 7. Is there somebody in Precinct 7 taken? Precinct 7 has 11. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 8. What is the total? There are 95 town meeting members present. It is now 7:38 p.m. At this time, I invite Congressman Stephen Lynch to assist me in opening the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Could I ask you to please rise? Remove your caps. Put your right hand over your heart. And join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I believe, Ms. Walsh, Cynthia, did you have a moment of silence on a list at all?
I don't have a list.
Okay, I didn't. Did you want?
Off the top of my head.
We'll pass it. This evening, we're honored to have a visit from Congressman Stephen Lynch, who is now beginning his, I believe, 7th term as a congressman. And I congratulate him on his landslide victory. It's pretty good. I know what it is to have a landslide for a while. It's better a landslide than a mudslide. At this time, he has like to deliver some comments on appropriate for the meeting. Congressman.
Thank you, Howard. Mr. Moderator, thank you very much. Good evening. I'm told by our moderator, Howard, that we've got quite a few issues on the agenda tonight, and so he's asked me to be brief, and I will not abuse the privilege that I've been given tonight. I do want to thank you for your kindness in last Tuesday's election, the overwhelming support that I received in Stoughton. Thank you very much. It's an honor to represent you in the United States Congress. Just a brief update on what's going on in Washington. As you may know, the Republican Party had very strong success in Washington in this past election nationally. The Republicans have captured the Senate by adding so far 7 new members, and they added to their majority in the House as well. And so a new Congress will be convened in January. We have what's called a lame duck session between now, actually beginning on Wednesday. I go back to Washington on Wednesday, and from that date, November 12th, until early January, we have what's called a lame duck session, and there are a number of things of importance that are coming up in terms of the business of the Congress in that session, in the remaining part of the session. We're bound to take up tax reform, although there is some resistance since the Republicans are going to be in a much better position in January. They have exercised some privilege in dealing with things after the first of the year when they'll have greater numbers. So we'll have to wait on what their strategy is. There is an effort to try to get a budget passed before January so that we'll have a clean slate in dealing with the appropriations bills, an omnibus bill in January of 2015, and go forward there. There are a number of issues that are percolating in Congress right now. One is the current administration believes that sanctions should be considered regarding Iran. There's some diplomatic sensitivity there since we are coming up on the deadline, November 24th, when the Obama administration and Secretary Kerry have been trying to negotiate a deal to prevent the development of nuclear weapons on the part of Iran. That negotiation has been going back and forth with progress in fits and starts, and they're afraid that if we go forward now with sanctions, further sanctions against oil sales by Iran, that we may jeopardize the ability to get an agreement on nuclear weapons development under the Rouhani regime in Iran. The President has requested $6.18 billion in emergency funding for the government's response to Ebola in West Africa, and he's also asked for approximately $6 billion for operations in Iraq and Syria against ISIS. He's also considering putting on the floor a further request for military use of force in Iraq and Syria against ISIS. That bill should be coming up, as I say, in probably November or December of this year, before the change in the lame duck session. Tomorrow we'll observe Veterans Day, an important occasion honoring the men and women who have nobly served our armed forces. I've recently come back. I led an oversight delegation to Iraq and Turkey several weeks ago in the wake of ISIS advances and their attack on Kobani. I had a chance to meet with the Kurdish Peshmerga and some of the moderate Syrian opposition leaders to assess the progress of regional and international security efforts to combat that threat. I also have a bill that I have introduced that's got some Republican support. It's called the Wounded Warriors Federal Relief Act. The way the situation is right now, if a veteran comes home, if someone comes out of the service and goes to work for the federal government, for the first year they don't receive any medical leave. So even though they may come back with PTSD, they may come back with some serious injuries, they don't get any medical leave to have that treatment until they begin their second year of federal employment. So what this bill would do, my bill would provide them with 104 hours in that first year so that they can build up time. They will have the opportunity to have their needs addressed in that first year that they come back. It's a gap right now, but I've heard from a lot of veterans who do go to work for the federal government that they don't have any time. They have to skip their appointments, their doctor's appointment. It's a very critical time that first year home. So this bill would provide them with 104 hours, and then that's it. By their second year, they'll have enough built up medical leave time on their own because of their service for that first year. They'll be on their own after that. But it does, as I say, it does have some support, both Republican and Democrat, so I'm hopeful for our success in that regard. One of the great honors I have as a member of Congress is to appoint young men and women from our local towns to the United States military academies. And I want to recognize two of our young people from Stoughton. Jeffrey Johnson, who's at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, class of 2015. He's from 18 Erica Drive, Stoughton. His parents are Ken and Sherry Ann. He was a Stoughton High School graduate, also went to Norwich University. And also Michaela Sakic, U.S. Naval Academy class of 2017. She's from 72 Bassick Circle, Stoughton. Her parents are Linda McNally and Darrell Sakic. She's a graduate of Cardinal Spellman High School. I make it a point to follow my appointees. Once I appoint them to either the Naval Academy or West Point, or in some cases the Air Force Academy. And I can tell you that both these young people from Stoughton are at or near the top of their class, and you have every reason to be very, very proud of their service to our country, especially coming from Stoughton. So God bless them for their willingness to serve. Thank you for your kindness to me and your indulgence. Thank you very much for participating in town meeting. This is the heart of democracy. It really all begins right here. And again, I'm very, very proud to represent the town of Stoughton in the United States Congress. Thank you.
Okay. We have to do some cleanup work here. Mr. Mullen. We have a situation where there's a question about the timeliness of the distribution of the report from the town meeting. This motion is to sort of clear the record. There's not an issue that we have to legally do here, but if it's challenged and we've taken this time to do it, it's on the books that you agree that you have stuff on time. Mr. Mullen, for the motion to accept for acceptance of late distribution of standing committee reports and recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move to suspend the directory rule on the Stoughton Charter, Article 7, Sections 7 through 14, Chapter B1.3, which requires that the Finance Committee to distribute a report to each of the town meeting representative at least 14 days in advance of a town meeting. And the report and warrant for this town meeting was distributed on October 28th, being only 13 days in advance of this meeting, and that at least 2/3 of those elected representatives present hereby agree that they have been adequately warned of this meeting, have had sufficient time to review the content of these reports, including the supplement issued November 1st, 2014, and are prepared to act on all such business that is lawful and legally before this assembly, having a quorum of duly qualified voting members present at the Stoughton High School on Monday, November 10th, 2014.
Second.
Mr. Moderator,
Mr. Hill. It's not open for discussion, really. Just make it brief.
well, I'm a little confused because your dates are incorrect. The warrants were postmarked 15 days in advance of town meeting and in the
Mr.
mail
Hill,
that next day.
you're out of order.
I'm not out of order. You're saying that we didn't mail them on time. We did. How is that out of order?
The question here, and we're doing this, I'm going by the date I received it. I know that they were mailed.
They were
It said-
postmarked, correct?
This is a matter of definition. It has already been, that the purpose of doing this is so that we don't get into this argument. It is just to cover our fannies.
But you
Okay.
didn't define anything.
What's that?
I did go to town council and asked for an opinion and said,
Yes,
what does
and I
distributed
disagree
mean?
with
And
town
they
council.
said, postmarked.
Mr. Hill, I respectfully disagree with you because I've been through this situation several times before in the past. And that is why we're doing it now, so that we don't spend our time arguing over it before. The last time it took 20 minutes to an hour to discuss this issue, where it can be resolved very simply by making this statement that you are satisfied with receiving the reports when you got them.
Well, again, I can't support it because it's incorrect.
Mr. Murphy. That's the cut-off debate. All those in favor of cutting off debate? Aye. All those opposed? On the motion, if it's not significant, I will have a standing count. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
I say it's significant. If you want to take a standing count, I'll do it. Move on. Yes. Passed by voice vote. Mr. Mullen, on the usual.
Okay, to the members here, I move to dispense with reading of a warrant and return thereof.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries.
My last motion is regarding move to adopt 4 new procedural motions for this and the next town meeting. Those are in the mailings that came out. And I'll just briefly say, in reference to presentations regarding warrant articles, the second one is informational public interest business. The third is speaking time per warrant article has been reduced from 10 minutes to 5 minutes. And the fourth one is public hearings, later missing reports. The provisions of Charter Section 7, Chapter 7 through 14A will be strictly enforced. That's my motion, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Morton, very briefly, because this is new.
There's a piece of this motion that I hope you vote against, and it has been tried time and time again, and that is limiting the speakers to 5 minutes. Almost no speakers speak longer than 5 minutes, but once in a while somebody's got something to say that takes more than 5 minutes. And I really resist the fact that the delay in this town meeting has nothing to do with the 5 or 10 minute rule. It has to do with a lot of other things. And I think if there's a speaker who has something to add, he should be able to speak for 10 minutes. And I will vote against this motion simply because of that. And in fact, I move to divide the question, to take that question separately, the 5 minute rule.
Second.
That's to vote individually. All right. Is there any discussion further? Yeah, Mrs. Ayers.
Donna Ayers, Precinct 3. I have issue with Part 3, speaking time per warrant article. Questions should be limited to yes or no answers. If we are discussing budgets and numbers, those aren't yes or no. We have to ask questions that won't qualify for those answers. We have to be not this restricted. We can't allow this to keep eroding the rights of the representatives. If we allow this to happen to us, then why do we bother showing up? Thank you.
Any further discussion on that? Yes, Mr. Mullen. Could you explain why?
All we're trying to do is, we met at the Rules Committee, all we're trying to do is speed up the process. Everybody says there's different issues delaying this process, this assembly during town meeting. Well, this is the beginning of maybe to speed it up a little bit. We're trying to affect some change here, and this is probably the first step along that way. You always can suspend the rules if there's a need to do that, but for now, why don't we try to, as an assembly, have some, cut down on the speaking time allotted to members and see how that works this time around. We can always change it again, but let's start somewhere. Maybe it will speed it up.
Mr. Coleman.
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5, on that yes and no answers, limiting the questions to yes and no. If there's something I need to find out, I want an answer. I want to vote intelligently. I don't want to just do a yes and no and kind of wonder what the answer means. Thank you.
Any further? Yes.
In brief, I don't know how that yes or no got in there, but I think you can have a qualified discussion, ask a question briefly, and get the answers that you're looking for. It doesn't have to be, I don't think it has to be yes or no, but as long as you try to limit it to 5 minutes. If you have something very detailed to ask, you can always ask the body to suspend the rules.
Then would it be up to this body, and I'll throw it out, if they wish to strike out that limitation to yes and no? Corey?
Clarification on the English language. The word should is a recommendation. The word shall or must is a directive. So the should is a recommendation, not an absolute. So keep that in mind.
So did I hear somebody formally put that motion to strike out the yes or no? Mr. Coleman did? All right. On just striking that out, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. I'll just put it right here, restruck. Mr. Ventresco did.
Peter Ventresco, Precinct 8. I agree with
Devon.
all the previous
Yep.
speakers that the 5-minute limit's a little too short. And one of the previous gentlemen here mentioned that the questions being asked at town meeting doesn't really slow the process down. I think what really slows it down is we get too many articles, 70 to 80 articles at a town meeting. That's what slows everything up. Thank you.
That is not our fault that we get 80 articles. On the moving of the question also is, all those in favor first. All those opposed. Moving the question. We're going to take a separate vote on item 3. I said all those in favor of, I heard. Who made the second? All right, now, on strictly number 3, all those in favor as amended. The amendment, well, all right, let me back this up. I did say all those in favor of removing the line that says questions should be limited to yes or no answers. That's all right. Now, on the division of the question, which is we're just voting on number 3, which says speaking time per warrant article, a customary 10-minute allotment of speaking time on the floor by all persons recognized to speak on the main motion shall be 5 minutes. That time is not yielded to another speaker. That 5 minutes is total time for any single speaker on an article. Extension of this time allotment will be subject to the permission of the assembly. We tried this before, so I'm not... All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? No. Then I'm going to say it's lost. Unless you, all right, if you want a visual count. All those in favor, please stand. Just very quickly, Precinct 1. Yeah. Precinct 2. Precinct 3. Precinct 4. All right. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 7. Precinct 8. I mean, precinct 5. Too many numbers. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 8. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 7. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 4. What do you have? All those opposed? There's no doubt in my mind. Precinct 1. 1 is 5. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 12. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 3. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 8. Precinct 5. Precinct 8. Precinct 5 is 4. Precinct 6 is 6. Precinct 7. 7 is 3. And precinct 8? 8 is 5. No, correction. On 6, 6 for 1, right? How many? There was 55 in favor, 47 opposed, so we'll stick with the 5 minutes. Okay, any other question on the rest of these? Which will be move right along. As the rest is as printed and presented. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? I will say the motion carries. That's the entire motion. Yeah. Yes. If you want to take a visual count, I can do. Okay. Just out of normal procedures here, the moderator's statement of certification is on file with the comments of some of the situations regarding this town meeting, and I'm just stating that there are some issues. If you want to see the statement of certification that has been filed, it will be filed in the records. It is available. Otherwise, we'll be here reading for a long time, and I will sign that. Essentially, it says most of all these things have been in compliance. I've had a request from Stephanie Patton from Oasis for a short presentation. It is actually Ms. Patton.
Yeah, we're going to show video first.
Moderator, point of information.
Mr. Collins.
It is now 8 o'clock. We have 15 articles to go.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Patton. I'm the prevention coordinator for the Oasis Coalition in Stoughton.
Miss Patton.
We know that a lot of great things are already
Miss
happening
Patton
in Stoughton, but sometimes we forget to talk about
requested
them.
this time earlier, and she has actually taken much less than she requested if you don't interrupt it.
Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. No wonder we don't get through a town meeting. Just ridiculous.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Patton. I'm the prevention coordinator for the Oasis Coalition in Stoughton. We know that a lot of great things are already happening in Stoughton, but sometimes we forget to talk about them. We would like to kickstart a conversation about all of the wonderful things that are happening already. What does Stoughton mean to you?
Stoughton means great opportunities for everyone working, living, and visiting. It's a great town to raise a family. It's a safe town.
What Stoughton means to me is fun sports, a great school, and a really good music program.
To me, Stoughton is a very special town. It's got great volunteerism and a real sense of community.
There's no place else I'd rather be. I think there's great people, great neighbors, and the community pulls together when they have to.
Stoughton means family and community to me.
Neighborhoods, community, spirit.
It's just a great community with a lot of great people who I am very, very pleased to serve as a firefighter.
Home and opportunity, that's what Stoughton means to me.
Wonderful schools, caring teachers, terrific town employees, and a population of people who really seem to come together when the going gets tough.
It really is a place where people have a sense of belonging and where they look out for their neighbors.
Stoughton is a land of opportunity and promise.
What Stoughton means to me is family, community, kindness, and people pulling together for one another.
What Stoughton means for me is home. I've traveled all over the world. I've been to places I never imagined I would ever go, but there's nothing like coming back to Stoughton and being home.
So Stoughton to me is about youth who care about their community and give back.
There's a wonderful mix of historical, educational now, civic, and it's a tight-knit community.
What Stoughton means to me is my friends helping me out and my teachers making sure I do the best that I can.
Stoughton means community pride, particularly with the undefeated Stoughton High Black Knight football team.
So I think that the word that I would use is committed. I think we have a committed community.
For me, it's pretty simple. Stoughton is home. I'm raising my child here, and I want it to be the best town it possibly can be.
We are filled with passionate, creative, talented people in our town.
What Stoughton means to me is a wonderful school system and great people, but most importantly, Danino's chicken parm from Danino's, Town Spa Pizza, all the wonderful places to eat and enjoy yourself in Stoughton.
It's knowing what's going on and being a part of making it better here in Stoughton.
Positive people in our community.
Stoughton means to me is family.
I love living here. I love the community, small town, how you tend to meet, know a lot of people.
If I picked one word to explain Stoughton, I would say opportunity.
Wherever I go traveling is, even though I no longer live in Stoughton, wherever I go and they say, "Where are you from?" I always answer, Stoughton.
For me, Stoughton represents history, culture, 4 generations of my family living in this town, and most of all, just the community feel to it. I wouldn't live anyplace else.
I really firmly believe in this town. I love the diversity, I like the way everybody gets along. So I guess it means just about everything to me.
You've heard from all of us. Now we want to hear from you.
What does Stoughton mean to you? Why do you live here, and what do you love?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for this opportunity. I'm only going to take 1 more minute of your time. My name is Stephanie Patton. I'm the prevention coordinator for the Stoughton Oasis Coalition. OASIS stands for Organizing Against Substances in Stoughton, and we have been successfully working together to reduce youth alcohol and drug use in Stoughton since 2003. I hope you enjoyed our video. A special thanks to Jeff Pickett at SMAC for making this possible. So you might be wondering, what does this project have to do with substance abuse prevention? And the answer is everything. Connecting to everything that is positive in Stoughton is the foundation for our prevention work. The truth is that we have been speaking this language in our coalition for a long time, but we are overdue in having this conversation with the whole community. Think of this as the coalition taking you into the basement and showing you our old Fieldstone rock foundation. It is strong and it is what holds us up. So please join us in this conversation. Contribute your thoughts, images, videos, ideas, and enthusiasm for your home, and we will share them with the community. You can reach us through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email, and watch for easels in public places in town to add your comments the old-fashioned way. Thank you for being united for a healthy Stoughton, and thank you for your time.
Paperwork. At this time, I recognize Mr. Hill to make any comments on the Finance Committee on the overall package.
No, just to say that kind of a tight time frame with the collective bargaining agreements that went through, so we're happy to see that happened. We wanted to make sure that we had plenty of time to be able to review and analyze that. The Vice Chair of the Finance Committee did a terrific job doing a very detailed analysis to make sure that we would come in right around the numbers that the Board of Selectmen and the Town Manager had said we would. So that was a worthy effort. And we'll see where we go from here. Thanks.
We begin officially. I turn all of this. Article 1. Mr. Hill.
Article 1 is a 4-part recommendation, so I'll read each of the 4 parts. That the town vote to appropriate $126,826 to supplement the fiscal FY 2015 Water Department expense budget, and to meet this appropriation, $126,826 be raised from the FY 2015 Water Department revenue. 2, that the town vote to appropriate $131 to supplement the FY 2015 Department 911 retirement expense budget, and to meet this appropriation, $131 be raised from the FY 2015 tax levy. 4, that the town vote to appropriate $3,000 to supplement the FY 2015 Department 510 Board of Health expense budget, and that to meet this appropriation, $3,000 be raised in the 2015 tax levy. And 6, actually 4, that the town vote to reduce the FY 2015 Sewer Department expense budget by $167,126 and reduce estimated 2015 revenue by $167,126.
Is there any discussion on this? Now, we're voting on the recommendation as a whole, unless somebody wants to divide the question. I can see that the sound isn't carrying. And that is strictly the recommendations that were read. Is there any further discussion on these? If not, I'll ask for the vote. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries, and I'm going to say it's unanimous. And that is 814. Article 2. I understand I need a motion from Mr. Rowe, or even...
I think the town manager is going to speak to this, Mr. Moderator.
Yeah.
Yeah, we move to dismiss.
On the motion to dismiss, I did hear a second. On the motion to dismiss, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion is carried. That's easy. At this time, I'm going to recognize Mr. Hill first to put a motion on the floor. for Article 3.
That the town vote to transfer $264,000 from the FY 2015 Department 300 Stoughton School Department budget to the FY 2015 Department 131 Finance Committee Reserve Budget Fund.
All right, now I have some various legal opinions that have been handed to me, and I defer first to, I'm going to ask the chairman of the school committee to read what he has from counsel from the school department. Mr. Ural, is he here? Was here a few minutes ago. Oh.
I'm sorry, I must have missed. What's the question?
Well, I would like you to read the letter that you presented to me from Emerson and Emerson.
Oh.
Then I'm going to defer to Lauren.
Now, should it be less than 5 minutes or less than 10 minutes?
It should be less than 5.
Yes or no?
That's the trouble. We have yes and no.
This letter is addressed to Mr. Howard Hanson, Town Moderator. Reference Article 3 of November 10, 2014, Town Meeting Warrant. Dear Mr. Hanson, please be advised that I represent the Stoughton School Committee. As you are aware, the spring 2014 Stoughton Town Meeting funded the Stoughton Public Schools budget for fiscal year 15. The special town meeting warrant for November 10 includes Article 3, which was submitted by the Finance Committee, asks the town meeting to transfer $264,000 to the Finance Committee's Reserve Fund budget. The Finance Committee's reason for this action is to allow it to hold the funds until such time that the school committee decides to expend them as the Finance Committee sees fit. In my opinion, there are a number of reasons why this article is inappropriate. First, it is essentially a reconsideration of the spring town meeting's vote to fund the school department budget. Specifically, the Finance Committee is seeking to reduce the school department's budget months after the town meeting funded it in accordance with Massachusetts general laws. 2, the condition set by the Finance Committee on which it will release the money to the school department is in violation of the Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 5, which provides, Section 5, a town may at any town meeting appropriate money for the exercise of any of its corporate powers, provided that a town shall not appropriate or expend money for any purpose on any terms or under any conditions inconsistent with any applicable provisions of any general or special law. 3, Article 3 also violates Chapter 71, Section 34, which provides in pertinent part in acting on appropriations for educational costs, the city or town appropriating body shall vote on the total amount of the appropriations requested and shall not allocate appropriations among accounts or place any restrictions on such appropriations. The vote of the legislative body of a city or town shall establish the total appropriation for the support of the public schools, but may not limit the authority of the school committee to determine expenditures within the total appropriation. Finance Committee is clearly placing conditions on how the Stoughton School Committee expends its funds. It is trying to limit the authority of the Stoughton School Committee, and it is making a motion for reconsideration of the spring town meeting vote to fund the school committee's budget well after such a motion may be made. Therefore, you, as the town moderator, must rule Article 3 out of order. Thank you.
At this time, I recognize Lauren Goldberg, who is acting as our town council this evening.
Moderator, who wrote the letter?
Oh.
May we have copy?
We've never seen it.
It is written by Joe Emerson.
Well, while Ms. Goldberg is making her comments, could you have the magic of modern technology and make a few copies for everybody?
Yes. Mrs. Shea will take
Mr. Moderator, through you, Lauren Goldberg, Town Council, Copeland and Page. With all due respect to Attorney Emerson, who I understand acts as the counsel to the school committee, I completely disagree that this article is out of order. Town meeting at any time may transfer appropriations from one purpose to any other legal purpose. The school committee, the finance committee has recommended that the school committee budget be reduced by a particular sum of funds. That sum is not earmarked in any particular way in the school department budget, and it's not earmarked in any particular way in what the school, what the finance committee is proposing to do the transfer. So I can respond on a point-by-point basis to his analysis. Town meeting often makes budget adjustments after the budget has been set in the spring. In fact, that's what you did under Article 1. Chapter 44, Section 33, capital B, and then in parentheses, paragraph B, says as well that you can do a transfer for any legal purpose once the money's been appropriated. Whether the Finance Committee chooses at some point to authorize a reserve fund transfer is essentially unrelated to the action that you're being asked to take today, but the Finance Committee would retain such authority as it already has under Chapter 40, Section 6, which is the statute that governs reserve fund transfers. And then Chapter 7134 is a statute that says that the school committee budget, the school department budget, is a bottom line budget, meaning that although the school department as a department of the town is required to come up with a budget where it's allocated particular dollars to particular actions and activities, the town side can't force the school committee to stay within those budgetary items. So for example, if the school department spends more on books and supplies and has less money to spend on some other school-related purpose, they have to make that work within their budget, but they don't have to come back to town meeting to get permission to do that. So what's being proposed today is a reduction in the school department budget by the $264,000, I believe. And so the school department still has full control over the remainder of their appropriation to do what it believes is most appropriate educationally for the children of the town. And ultimately, therefore, the article and the motion under the article are completely in order, in my opinion. Thank you. Mr. Moderator, if I may, I meant to add that we were asked about this earlier, and this is the opinion we gave at that time, and we would be prepared to put this in writing at any time in a more formal way.
Ms. Campbell, please stand to be recognized if you want to do this, if you're not.
Hi, Carolyn Campbell, Precinct 5. I would like to, since we've had two different legal opinions about the legality of this motion, and we've asked for, people have asked that one, the school committee provide copies of its letter. I would also like to have copies of both of the letter from the town council as well. Both of these opinions are new. Both of your arguments are new to me. They were made tonight. I would like to check the validity of them. Can we trust both of you? I don't know either one of you, so I would like to be able to do my own research, and without letters in writing, I can't do that. Thank you.
Mr. Hill, do you have something there that?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll try to keep this to 5 minutes. Time's up. Just to let you know, there was, based on a request from a member of the Finance Committee back in September 23rd, we'd requested an opinion from Copeland and Page from Attorney Joe Fair about this particular recommendation that the Finance Committee wanted to make. And and he had concurred with Attorney Goldberg's opinion as well. So we have that email in writing. I have it here if you'd like to. Could we have copies of it, please? Sure. Jamie, do you have the copy? Thank you. So to address that question, but the overall question, what was the Finance Committee motivated before, and just very quickly, when the budget's originally released, the subcommittee on education for the Finance Committee has detailed, in-depth hearings on the budgets. Within those hearings, the 15 new positions for the school were brought to the table. And we reviewed those in depth, so we knew exactly what they were and why they were. In around town meeting of last year, we understood that the school committee was putting a hiring freeze in place. Now, the Finance Committee had made a recommendation at town meeting to fully fund the budget request, but if 15 positions were going to be not used, then we wanted to think about that. So the subcommittee on education from finance had another hearing with the school committee. And we thought at that meeting, we also had commitment from the school committee chair to fully hire all those positions. So we made a recommendation at town meeting to support it. At town meeting, the school committee chair was again questioned about this, and at town meeting said, yes, we will be hiring all those positions. A couple months later, a question came up about 3 Unit B positions. The chairman, I believe, or somebody in the school committee made a recommendation in executive session to defund these positions. It showed up as an agenda item as a transfer with no explanation on the next school committee meeting. It was then understood that that was when they wanted to remove these positions. The school committee chair asked the superintendent of schools what she wanted to do, and she says, well, I want to hire the positions. He asked the school's attorney, he says, I can't decide that for you. So the committee voted to not fund the positions. On September 16th, the school committee chair had sent an email to the town accountant. And in it he said, specifically asking about this money for these 3 positions, and said, and I'll quote, can this money be returned to the town immediately? Or do we need to find a place to park the money until the end of the fiscal year? So we got an opinion from town council about what could be done or not done. We wouldn't let any department have over $250,000 just kicking around in their budget. Finance Committee had made a recommendation to fully fund the whole budget. It's the largest budget ever approved or recommended by, approved by town meeting and recommended by the FinCom. We understand and recognize that the school committee has every authority to spend the bottom line of their budget. We do a lot of work to make sure that we know what's in that budget. When those variables change, we need to react. We could have not taken any action. We could have voted to take a resolution, make a resolution to town meeting, or we could vote to put those monies into the Finance Committee reserve. So should there come a time when they want to fill those positions, for example, the money's available. So we were told, well, we were asked, why do you want to defund these positions? And we were told it was fiscally irresponsible. Well, this was the same group that had voted for the budget and recommended it to this town meeting, and now those positions are fiscally irresponsible. In the attorney's letter, he said that we would have this money set aside to spend as we see fit. That couldn't be farther from the truth, and I don't know where that quote came from. And without condition, don't know where that quote came from. We wanted to see those positions because they're focused on curriculum development.
Last 5 minutes. You wish to have them continue? All those in favor of allowing it?
Thanks, I won't need 5. The 3 positions are basically based on curriculum development. The school committee has a 5-year plan, rolling plan about how to improve our schools, and we just got terrific news about the MCAS scores rising. So, and you can't rest on 1 year's results, but excellent forward progress. These are the experts that recommended these positions. And then they were taken out because they were said to be fiscally irresponsible. We don't understand that, so yes. We met for information purposes to speak about what was being done and if anything needed to be done to react by the Finance Committee, because we would expect that the town meeting would expect us to not just sit by and let $250,000, more than $250,000, roll around somebody's budget unallocated. So that's the story. You know, there's an article in the Enterprise Thursday. And, you know, again, here we are in violation of the law, which we made every effort to make sure that what we were doing was above board, that we're open, and, you know, we don't have executive sessions for the most part, and we're a transparent book. So all of our meetings are on SMAC. You were all, anybody with an email address was mailed the clips of those meetings. We have clips of the parts of the meetings where we had commitment, where we said we had commitment from the school committee chair. So that's what motivated our action. We have no other underlying goal here other than to make sure that, you know, that money was protected, because it seemed like there was a lot of varying opinions about what was to happen with it. So the FinCom recommended it. The subcommittee of the FinCom recommended it. The town meeting voted for it. The Board of Selectmen voted for it. The experts said, you need these positions. We'd like a lot more, but we can only have 15, 3 of which should be curriculum development. And Unit B, by the way, was never consulted about this. And they are upset about it to the point where they're considering taking action. So I'll leave the specifics about why those positions are needed to the superintendent of schools, if she'd care to speak on that, through you, Mr. Moderator, but I think that's all I have to say. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the extra time.
Ms. Rizzi? Dr. Rizzi?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, through you. Ladies and gentlemen of town meeting, good evening. Lovely to see all of you tonight. It is in fact the case that our administrative team, including the principals, the members of Unit B, our administrators union, and our entire team who composed the budget for FY15, which we are now currently operating, and the school committee at the time the budget was developed, all considered these positions to be extremely important. to the running of the school system. And thank you, Mr. Hill, for mentioning the fact that we have seen some very significant achievement this year. That significant achievement is a result of a process of over 5 years of planning and staging and adding things back as we've been able to, all with a purpose. And that long plan has definitely shown some results. The plan is not completed. We have 2 to 3 more years to finish and get where we would really like to be in all areas. We considered those positions to be extremely important in that effort, particularly given the demands of the new curriculum that has been handed to us from the state, and also the many additional observations and evaluations in the new state evaluation system. And that is why those positions were recommended. And there has nothing that has happened that would indicate to me that we do not need them. All the reasons that we put those forward are still, in effect, but it has been the decision of the school committee at this time to not fund those jobs.
We have a few more people who were, Mr. Mitchell.
Finance Committee member, Precinct 8. I was one of the 3 people who voted against this. First of all, the opinion I get from town council here says something about we can take the bottom line. We did not discuss the bottom line. As the chairman told you, we discussed 3 different jobs. So I don't think the town council's ruling expresses what we did and what we want the town meeting to do as a finance committee is take $264,000 that was earmarked for 3 jobs and not put it back in the general fund, which I would have voted for, but put it in the reserve of the finance committee. I don't think this is right, and I don't think and I'd like to get another opinion from town council that we can micromanage the school department's budget, which I don't believe is true. And I also don't think that the finance committee should be doing that. We have to vote the bottom line on the school committee. That's the state law. Once we start taking money back and expressing the jobs that we're taking the money back for, I still believe that the school committee's lawyer is right and that we're breaking the law. Thank you.
Mr. DeFelice.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mr. Moderator, maybe you can answer this question. I thought when funds were basically returned to town meeting, they pretty much automatically went into the general fund. Is that not the case? And if so, why are we having this argument? Why isn't this money just going to the general fund?
Can anyone answer that?
Do you have the answer, sir?
No, well, you're not supposed to be answering questions. Oh. Mr. Hill, you have an answer.
That was the motion that was made by the Finance Committee, with the thought being that if it went back to the general fund, it would take another special town meeting and 2/3 vote of this group to be able to allocate those funds back again, where the thought being if that was in the Finance Committee reserve, it would just be a simple vote of the Finance Committee, a simple majority vote of the Finance Committee, just to return it right back to the schools. I think that's the motivation.
Thank you. From listening to these arguments, I haven't really been following this throughout the summer when these people have been arguing over this issue. But what I see here, to me, it looks like clearly is a attempt by the Finance Committee to usurp the authority of the school committee. Now, I don't believe that the Finance Committee should be lecturing the school committee or any other town department. Once they have made their recommendations, that's it. They're obliged to recommend. They're not supposed to be promoting one department or another, and that would apply to all departments, not just the school committee. I think that's clearly wrong. If they want to advocate for the school committee, then they should be running for those positions. when people are elected, I think it was President Obama said, elections have consequences. So you have a committee that made a decision, which is their right to do because they were elected to do that. However, if we're not happy with that, then we must go to the next election in the spring, and if enough people are unhappy with what the school committee did, they'll be ousted. That's how this should be done. That's the democratic way of doing this. Not by having a finance committee all of a sudden deciding whether or not they like a vote of an elected body in this town. It's patently wrong. I think that, well, one more question I'd like to ask. I'd like to ask town council. Town council mentioned that she could provide a letter, but she was uncomfortable at this time to do so. And the committee stated, let me finish.
All right.
All right. The committee said they had a letter, so does she agree with that letter? No, I'm asking the council.
Ms. Goldberg.
Are you okay with this letter now? Or?
Mr. Moderator, through you. In response to the speaker, I had actually said that I was perfectly comfortable issuing a letter. If you notice the date on the letter, at least the one that I received from the moderator when I arrived tonight, it was dated November 9th, which was yesterday. Certainly, had I had this in advance, I would have been able to prepare a point-by-point response, which I am comfortable doing. I told you the rationale this evening for my position, and I don't have a moment's hesitation about it. It's a standard transfer article.
Okay. Thank you. One last thing. You know, if this money did go back to the general fund, perhaps we could use some of that money to fund the lacrosse team. We have kids going all around town begging for money to play lacrosse, and we've got a chunk of money. Maybe that would be the appropriate use. However, I think that because we have two divergent opinions, I think we just should be down at the courthouse, because that's what's going to obviously happen here, because no matter how we vote tonight, either party is probably going to end up going to court. So maybe we should just have them either try to negotiate something between the two lawyers, or let a judge tell us. Thank you.
Ms. Campbell.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Campbell, Precinct 5. While I have no problem with, I agree that the positions that are not being funded are needed. I am a bit concerned by this article, just because I think in the last year or so, politics has been very contentious in the town, and there's a perception that people are making decisions based on personalities or what they perceive of the other party. I don't know if this is the case here. There's possibility it is, the possibility is, and I will defer to the people and say that nobody is doing it, everyone has good intentions. But I am concerned that it's just going to add more fuel to the fire and prevent us from discussing real issues. My other concern is I'm afraid that it will set a dangerous precedent for in the future. There are times that, you know, school committees have had to freeze money, not spend money on positions that they were planning to at town meeting, and, you know, because something comes up. There are plenty of times that town departments, they don't fill positions right away. They may wait till April or May, then fill the positions such as the Human Resources Director, because they either don't have the funding, or it takes that long to advertise, or they want to wait and see before they start posting it. And what is to stop them, you know, somebody from coming and filing an article to transfer that money to the Finance Committee until they choose to vote for that position? And I just think it raises possibilities that we don't raises, excuse me, dangerous possibilities in the future for, you know, to make a point that you didn't like that the school committee didn't fund these positions. I do think they should be funded. I think the school committee should vote to fund them and hire them. But I don't think we should take the money away and give it to the Finance Committee's reserve fund to make them do so. Thank you.
Mr. Quaglia? Guglia, and the two people.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Guglia, Precinct 6. I am a member of Unit B. I'm an assistant principal at the O'Donnell Middle School. I don't need to rehash it for you. These three positions would help the school system. There have been some important laws that have changed in terms of school discipline and curriculum. These positions would impact me. They would impact all the students in Stoughton. I am absolutely 100% baffled how we're in this position. I hear that the school committee supported these positions in the spring. I hear from the finance committee the money was there. I hear from Dr. Rizzi she supports the positions. I don't understand why we're here tonight talking about that. That being said, I support this motion. If the positions are not going to be filled by the school committee, this money should go back to the finance committee. Thank you.
Mrs. Anzavino. Mr. Murphy.
Move the question.
Ms. Murphy cut off debate. Motion has been made to cut off debate. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Debate is cut off. On the motion, whatever the consequences are, on the motion, I'll read it. To transfer $264,000 from the FY 2015 Department 300. I do have one question on, are we still using those department numbers? And Stoughton School Department budget to fiscal year 2015 Department 131 Finance Committee Reserve Fund budget. That's the motion. Bill, before we go.
Those are the correct department numbers, Mr. Moderator.
That's it, those are the numbers you're using, in spite of what we had for budget last year. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. It's out in the mind of the chair. All those in favor, please rise and the chairman take account. Precinct 1. 10. Precinct 1 is 10. Precinct 2. 12. Precinct 2 is 12. Precinct 3. Precinct 3, Mr. Gator. 9. Precinct 3 is 9. Precinct 4. 12. Precinct 4 is 12. Precinct 5. 10. Precinct 5 is 10. Precinct 6. 12. Precinct 6 is 12. Precinct 7. 7. Again? 7. 7. Precinct 8. 8 is 4. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1. 0. Precinct 1 is 0. Precinct 2. 7. Precinct 2 is 7. Precinct 3. Precinct 3. 5. Precinct 7 is 5. Precinct 4. 5. Precinct 4 is 5. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 1. Precinct 6. 4. Precinct 6 is 4. What's that anymore? You said 4. Yes, yes, no, we've done that. Precinct 7. 2, 1. And precinct 8. 5. Precinct 8 is 5. What do you have? The motion carries 76 yes, no 29, and one abstention. Go to Article 4. It is my understanding that I need, there has been no contract or any.
Right, the Finance Committee deferred this to town meeting, and I think the town manager probably has a...
Yeah, we would move to dismiss number 4.
Motion to dismiss. The town manager. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries, it's dismissed. We're moving right along. I shouldn't say that. Mr. Hill, Article 5.
That the town vote to appropriate $161,308 to implement a collective bargaining agreement between the town and the Stoughton Police Patrolmen's Association, and that to meet this appropriation, $161,308 be raised in the FY 2015 tax levy.
Any discussion? Mr. Cohen.
Can someone give me details of how much they're getting? I mean, we're going to give $161,000 and no one knows nothing.
Right
Isn't that
here.
wonderful?
Mr. Cohen. It's all here.
And one other question I have, Mr. Moderator. How much legal expense did we pay on this particular article, may I ask? From our town council, how much have we paid for negotiating this contract? She won't know. Someone here should know. Like the town manager?
Right, I would suggest that the town accountant or the
Fine.
chairman have that number.
Because I'm going to ask this in every contract, how much we spent on legal expense. Then I'll tell you why I'm asking this.
Do we have an answer? Mr. Rowe, do you have any answer on how much we're spending on legal expenses?
No, I don't have that broken down, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Moderator, there's a reason why I'm asking this question. Because way back when we hired a personnel director, he was supposed to handle all this stuff. And it ends up that we're paying a small fortune for legal expense. Because the person that settled the contract was our town council and the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. That's where it came down to. I hate to say it, we hire a personnel director here, and we're having to pay just as much as we did before, and have the chairman of the board finally make some decisions here. That is something that we ought to think about in next year's budget, because that's what a personnel director's job is to do. And there's more to say to this, but I don't want to bring it up at this time. We have good contracts, but this is something that should be discussed next year, and I would still like to know how much we spent on legal counsel for these three, and I guarantee you'll be shocked to find out how much. This has gone on for God knows how long. And we should look and to ask the town manager, and I'd like to find out the defiant word of what a personnel director does here, period. Thank you.
Mr. Recupero, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen.
I just wanted to address the question about how much we've spent on town council, because from what I understand from the previous speaker, he's going to ask this with all the articles. I don't think there's anybody who can, at this present time, tell you that. I'd suggest to you my own take is not as much as the inference is. However, Some of those bills will be executive session matters that have yet to be approved. Others will be matters that we have yet to pay because we just wrapped up these contracts, and there was a flurry of activity more recently. I mean, if the question is how much we spent, that's something that I don't think we'll have an answer for some time, but certainly something that I'll be happy to get you at a later date, but okay.
Mr. Hill.
What I can tell you is that the amount budgeted in the Board of Selectmen's budget was $208,000, and that should have been to cover the negotiations of the contracts in addition to their other legal expenses and fees.
Mr. Gearon?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jim Gearon, Precinct 6, Finance Committee. I voted for these, I'll say these contracts, but this contract during our negotiations. But that was out without really knowing, having some kind of a sense of what the bottom line was. But when I saw Ms. Colburn's memo on finalizing these, I'm looking at some FY 2015 increases, percentage increases. And I see numbers like 6.8% and 8.04% and 7.6% for these contracts. Now, I don't know how the rest of you feel about this thing here, but we've been in a kind of a tough time in this country for a long, long time. And when I see increases like this, I think they're outrageous. I'm probably going to vote against this tonight only because of the size of this first year increase. I would like to know, though, however, what did we get in exchange for these large first year increases? Negotiations are back and forth kind of things. We must have gotten something really, really, really good here, but I don't know what it is. Somebody tell me?
Mr. Recupero.
The value with this and with all of the other contracts that will be before you this evening is, I think, first and foremost, labor peace. We have reached agreement with 3 of the 4 outstanding employee associations and unions. That's important. They were all made affordable, and there was a give and take. Some of it involved things like management rights. Some of it involved things that were in the personnel bylaw that this body approved 2 years ago, or 2 town meetings ago. We can go through an itemization. You have contracts, I believe, actually in your packets. But in the end, what we're looking to do is approve contracts. We have a new platform. I think that's important. A new platform for each of these negotiations going forward. We have 1 remaining. I spoke with the town manager. Negotiations are ongoing, and we're very hopeful that that can be resolved too. But labor peace, and I don't think we can diminish that. We have contracts with our employees done. Let's approve them, scrutinize the financing for sure, but move along. Thank you.
I guess I'm not adverse to settling contracts, but bending over backwards kind of troubles me a bit. I'm going to vote against this. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Do I hear a motion to? Motion to move the question. Been made. Do I hear a second? I don't know. I heard several of them. On the motion, just requires a majority vote to appropriate $161,308 to implement a collective bargaining agreement between the town and the Stoughton Police Patrolmen's Association. Thought I did. Okay. On cutting off debate, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Well, now we get back on. Again, the motion is to appropriate $161,308 to implement a collective bargaining agreement between the town and the Stoughton Police Patrolmen's Association, and that to meet this appropriation, $161,308 be raised in the fiscal 2015 tax levy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I will declare it a vote. And this is 902. I got advanced time. Article 6, Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $208,024 to implement a collective bargaining agreement between the town and Local 1512 International Association of Firefighters, AFL-CIO, and that to meet this appropriation, $208,024 be raised in the FY 2015 tax levy.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, I see no discussion, no debate, no. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. What do you got, 903? Well, since I'm 1 minute ahead. I get 903. Takes a minute to write. Article 7. Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $139,434 to implement a collective bargaining agreement between the town and the Public Works Association, and that to meet this appropriation, $3,609 be raised from FY20 sewer revenue and $135,825 to be raised from the FY 2015 tax levy.
Second.
Any discussion? No, I hear no discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? I say motion carries. Article 8. I don't have, call on the town manager.
We move to dismiss Article 8.
On the motion to dismiss, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. Article 9. Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $110,000 to continue improvements of the Muddy Pond water supply, including but not limited to the costs of evaluating alternatives, constructing, reconstructing, and permitting, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $110,000 in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 8, Paragraph 4A, or any other enabling authority, and issue bonds and notes therefore.
Second.
I heard a second. Is there any discussion? We want to hear from, I hear no discussion. As this is a borrowing, if it's not unanimous, I will be required to take a standing count. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. Please rise. Precinct, no, I need a record. Yeah. Yeah, that's all. So it's not. Precinct 1.
10.
Precinct 1 is 10. Besides, I'm getting an attendance here. Precinct 2.
19.
Precinct 2 is 19. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 10. Precinct 4 Precinct 4 is 17. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 is 11. Precinct 6. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 14. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 10. Precinct 8. 8 is 9. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1? 0. Precinct 2?
1 abstention.
1 abstention. Precinct 3? 1. Precinct 3 is 1. Precinct 4? Precinct 4 is 0. Precinct 5? Precinct 5 is 0. Precinct 6? 6 is 0. Precinct 7? 0. Precinct 8? 0. You have 100?
He's over there. We probably have to speak on 2.6 million. We probably have to speak.
And I got 1 and 1.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
1. Yep. That means we have 106 people here. The motion obviously carries. It's 104 yes, 1 no, 1 abstention. The motion is approved. I written 1, no, 104. Okay, so we have 102 present. Okay. Very confusing. We have a great sound system.
We'll be here for those done. It was 2014.
All right. The vote again, yes, 100, 1 no, 1 abstain. No, it's 100. 104. F4. That's all right. We haven't even got started yet, and we're almost punchy. Okay, Article 10, Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. That the town vote to appropriate $600,000 to continue improvements to the sewer system to reduce infiltration and inflow, I&I, including all costs incidental and related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $600,000 in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 7, Paragraph 1, or any other enabling authority, and issue bonds and notes therefore.
Second.
Just a quick comment. The Finance Committee did vote to support this, because generally it's really just a changing of hands. We borrow it, we get a matching grant from the state, and then we immediately pay off this amount of the fund of what we borrowed. I forget what the match is. I think it's 60-40 this year, going to 70-30. In other words, they'll give us 70% back. And we said that we'd do this with a comment. You'll see down it says Article by rescinding Articles 29C from 2014 for $300,000 and Article 37 from 2013 for $300,000. So this article is to replace those two, because there was some language in there that prevented the town from going out to borrow. So,
Mrs. Ayers.
Donna Ayers, Precinct 3. I just have a question about these Department of Public Works articles. Why aren't these in the annual? Why are we meeting for them now? Thank you.
Mr. Batchelder.
Good evening. This particular article, there were 2 articles, as was just explained, that were $300,000 each. The language, the way that they were written, made it impossible for me to borrow the full amount of money that we needed. So when we had a project put together, when we were ready to put it out on the street, we had to wait. All this does is correct the language The way MWRA is, in order to give you money for free, you have to borrow the money from them, the complete amount. So what we do is, that's exactly what we do to get the free cash. Then the amount of money that normally we would have in our coffers that we wouldn't need to borrow goes back to MWRA right away, so we have no debt service. So you borrow the whole thing, they give you the check, you give them back the part that would that costs us money, and we end up with free money. Does that answer your question? These were in the annual. Over the past 2 years, the language makes it impossible for me to use the money to get any work done. It's taking the place of articles from last year's fiscal year and the year before that I could not borrow.
Mr. Hill.
Mr. Batchelder, I think, and through you, Mr. Moderator, I think Ms. Ayers is asking about all three. So first of all, the I&I one that we're just talking about now, but she's talking about the $100,000 for Muddy Pond, why we needed that now since town meeting, and the $2.6 million for the upcoming article.
The Muddy Pond article is because shortly after town meeting, regular town meeting started, we lost Muddy Pond. That's 35% to 40% of our water supply. I'm looking for enough money to have the consultants come in and get us rolling so that when I can come back at next town meeting and know what we need to do to get that back online. I didn't want to, the station would be down a year if I didn't do it this way, and then it would be down at least another year or two after that to get it up and running. So I'm just trying to stay ahead of the curve a little bit.
Any further discussion? Mr. Murphy. I wrote it down here.
Peter Murphy, Precinct 2, Municipal Operations. At the public hearing, it was brought up that this money, we had already approved it and all that. Because we were not a quorum, we could not vote on this article. And I'm going to go a little off track here for a second, but no, I'll come back to that. What happens is, if you look at our comments, we're allowed to make comments of what we heard at the public hearing. And I mentioned the both articles of the $300,000 that we already approved. It was also said that the money from these articles would then be rescinded once we approve the money tonight. So it's basically just a shuffling from one statement to another. So, and I believe, John, you were going to send a letter to the town.
That's correct, with the exception of the money that they took from my sewer department as borrowing funds. I wanted returned to the sewer department because that money we do use for I&I.
Okay. So, okay. The only comment, I take a little privilege here. When you get on a committee, it's important that you all show up. It's very discouraging for the two people that show up on municipal operations. We don't have a quorum there, and we can't vote. We had several articles. It's a voluntary thing that we come here. We go, we get elected. If you don't want to be on these committees, make sure you say no to your chair people, and they'll put somebody else. Thank you.
Second.
On the motion to cut off debate, Mr. Cohen made, and I heard a second from that. Ms. Walsh made it. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. On the motion, if it's not unanimous, I'll have to take account, and that is to appropriate $600,000 to continue improvements of the sewer system to reduce infiltration and inflow, including all costs incidental and related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $600,000 in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7, paren 1, or any other enabling authority, and issue bonds and notes therefore. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion is unanimous. That is now 9:15. We may make it. Article 11, Mr. Hill.
That the town vote to appropriate $2,506,000 to continue improvements of Island Street, Mill Street, and Turnpike Street water mains, including all costs incidental and related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, be authorized to borrow $2,506,000 in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 8, 5 or 6, and any other enabling authority, and issue bonds and notes therefore.
Second.
And I just have a footnote here that this is discussed on page A7 in this folder. Any further discussion?
In the appendix.
If there being none, if this is not unanimous, I'll have to take account. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. It is unanimous, and it is now 9:16. Who's? I should set.
Thank you very much, town meeting members.
We don't have a formal motion here.
At this time, as a courtesy, Mrs. Zoll is a representative to the Southeastern Regional School Committee, and I ask, we haven't got a motion on the floor yet. She can make a motion. However, I'll let her speak for herself in the school district. Incidentally, there is on page 13 in the appendix a very lengthy discussion on this.
I'm not used to making motions, so to see if the town will vote to approve the establishment of a stabilization fund according to Mass General Law, Chapter 71, 16G 1/2 for the Southeastern Regional Vocational Technical School District, or take any action relative to the...
Start after the word district.
Okay, district, okay. Okay, what Southeastern wants to do is what the town of Stoughton has already done, and that's set up a stabilization fund. We are a public school that serves the town of Stoughton. Last year, we had about 125 Stoughton residents attending Southeastern. Southeastern has something called E&D, excess and deficiency, and what that is basically our free cash. And what they want to do is take, by statute, we're limited to only 5% of the previous year's budget can be in E&D. So that means for us, about this year, it would be 1.1 million. Presently, we probably have about a little less than $500,000 in E&D. What we want to do is, if at the end of the year we see we have decent balance in E&D, once we have a stabilization fund, move some of that money there, so if we have a major capital expense, we would have the money to pay for it without going back to the towns to get a special assessment. So that's the purpose of the stabilization fund. And I want you to consider that Southeastern Regional had a $32 million building project that's been completed and did not go to any town for a special assessment. So we've been extremely responsible with our money, and we just feel this is another way of being responsible without assessing the town's additional money. So that's what I have to say.
Does anybody have any questions on this?
She made a motion, I seconded it.
Thank you. Which is essentially the same wording is in the warrant. and that would be to approve the establishment of a stabilization fund according to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 71, Section 16, G and 1/2, for the Southeastern Regional Vocational Technical School District. There is no appropriation. I do have to ask Town Council, does this require a 2/3 vote, or is this a separate plan requiring the, just a majority vote? Mr. Cohen.
You said it, no money involved. How much is this going to cost us? If there's no money involved, why is there an article here?
I believe your counsel, yes, please.
I don't, there's another, what we pay.
Through you, Mr. Moderator. The general laws, Chapter 71, Section 16G1/2, require that the school committee vote by a majority vote to request the creation of this fund, and then that it be approved by a majority of those, let me just check if it's a majority, of the local appropriating authorities of the member municipalities. It can then only be spent by a 2/3 vote of the entire regional school district committee after that.
Again, I will ask you, if this is all approved, right, how much money is involved here?
None yet.
There's got to be money involved in a stabilization fund. I don't
And
care.
that'll be a separate article, and you can say no.
Folks, may I speak about this honestly? I've talked about this for 10 years. The legislation moved a little bit on this Southeast Regional School. And it is here that Brockton goes for nothing and everyone pays for it. We raised enough stink to get them to drop our fees, but go look in your town finance committee report and look at how much we paid. It's a great school, but when you have 1,000 kids or whatever going out of Brockton, or say 700, we have 125, and they pay less than we do. Now we're looking for a stabilization fund to start again. We just had 32 million. They did a great job over there. But you know something? Go look at this and look what we pay to educate our children, especially the other towns with smaller amount of children. We raised enough stink where they dropped their rates to us. But still, go look at what Brockton pays and look at what we pay, and it's a disgrace.
Mr. Moderator, through you, the statute does impose certain limits on the amount that can be placed in the fund. The first is that the budget can include in any year for deposit in the stabilization fund an amount not exceeding 5% of the total amount apportioned to the member municipalities for the preceding fiscal year, or a larger amount that may be approved by the Director of Accounts, and the aggregate amount in the fund cannot exceed 5% of the combined equalized valuations of the member municipalities.
What if the majority of towns disapprove this article? What happens then?
Mr. Moderator. The only way that this can be created is with approval of the majority of the member towns. So
Thank
if
you.
there is not, then it will
Thank
not
you very much.
come into being.
Any further discussion? Mr. Anzavino.
Mr. Moderator, while Mr. Anzavino's coming to the mic, I'd just like to point out that on page 813 is actually the general law that's, that we extracted and put in the book for you. So we generally do for any laws that are referenced in the articles.
And John Anzavino, Precinct 4, and that's actually exactly what I came up to question, and it's what Town Council just read, is what I had underlined here. At the public hearings, this was, let's just say it wasn't quite clear on exactly how this would work, at least in my mind, when this was presented to the Finance Committee. But I do know there was a Finance Committee member that did ask, how do you decide to appropriate the money to this fund because of the discrepancies on how you have to pay for your students that go there. And the impression was given that, well, no, it's not that same type of formula. But the way I read this and the way this section that council just read was that this can be in the annual budget for deposit in the stabilization fund, an amount not exceeding 5% of the aggregate amount apportioned to the member municipalities for the preceding fiscal year, which, at least the way I read it, and maybe council can correct me if I'm wrong, please do, that the 5% would be based on what our apportioned charge is for that school. And we all know that this formula from the state is really detrimental to us when you look at it, at least in my humble opinion. And while I understand the want to do a stabilization fund and so forth, I don't think this has really been clearly defined to us on what we would be putting on the line here for what we would have to pay into this. And if the fund is established, they put it in the budget, and you're responsible. Now if I'm not mistaken, at the Finance Committee said, well, you know, if you don't vote for it, but the majority do, the fund is established, but it's still up to you if you want to pay into it. But I don't think that's the case. So I'm very leery with this because I just don't think you even know what you're appropriating here. I know the intent is to establish the fund, but once that fund is established, and it was, to me, even more concerning that it was limited, and they say for the preceding year, or such a larger amount as may be approved by the Director of Accounts. And it also goes on to say how they can invest and so forth and do this. I'm just very leery of this, and frankly, I'm going to vote against it. I don't think we have the information we really need to know what the type of commitment we're making here financially. Thank you.
Mr. Elliott Hansen? No.
Does Mrs. Zoll
Any
want to
further
respond?
discussion? Mr. Cohen has moved the question. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? On the motion to cut off debate is there. On the motion, if I can read my handwriting here, is to approve the establishment of a stabilization fund according to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 71, Sections 16G and a half for whatever else it's written in the article for the Southeastern Regional School. See, yes. Well, I'm supposed to be reading it as written, but I can't read my writing. If this is not unanimous, no, this is just a simply majority vote. This is a very unusual thing. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I'm going to say by voice vote, it sounded no. Motion lost. 928. Now, at this time, I recognize Selectman and Precinct 1 Chairman Robert O'Regan to make the motion on Article 13. Don't read the whole thing, but include the changes.
Only 2 sentences.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move to adopt Article 13 as printed in the warrant with the revisions in the handout presented to the body today that, Mr. Moderator, I had provided to you back in October. That's my motion. If there's a second, I'd be happy to explain what we do. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I appreciate the body taking this up again. This is a revision to the abandoned property bylaw that was proposed for the annual town meeting, and the revisions reflect changes that town meeting indicated in the last debate you would like to see in a bylaw. Let's start with the beginning. The beginning is that we have an issue, a problem in this community in dealing with dilapidated buildings, whether they're residential, commercial, or industrial, abandoned, not maintained. And we're not talking about aesthetic issues here. That was one of the comments that many members had in the spring. We're talking about situations in properties that invite vagrants, that create issues of safety for public safety personnel who would go into them in the event of a fire or any other need, that create attractive nuisances for people in the community, particularly children, and that create habitats for folks who, say maybe the four-legged variety. This is what this is aimed at, giving us a tool to address. The question is, don't we have laws on the books now to do it? That's a comment I've heard at the last time, it's a comment I heard from the public hearings, it's a comment I've heard this evening. Let me tell you, the answer to that is no, and that's why this warrant article is before you. Why? Well, there's a gap in our ability to deal with vacant and abandoned and dilapidated properties, and the gap is that the tools we have are condemnation proceedings that the building inspector can use, and a tax taking if the properties are not being taken care of to the point where the owner doesn't pay the taxes. Up until that point, we do not have an ability to deal with vacant and abandoned property all across the board. So we have to wait. It makes no sense for the community to try to take over neglected property by tax taking, because then we get the liability. And think of the detriment to the community. So, in my precinct, Precinct 1, there was a property that was derelict, that our police department was unable to do anything with. It was open. They would go in, they would do what they could, and as soon as the police were gone, people were back. And this property was in a neighborhood. We had no ability to deal with it. The property owner could not be compelled to board it up and lock it up. That's what this bylaw is intended to give us, an ability to require a property to be boarded up and locked up if it is not being occupied. So in response to town meeting's comments from the annual town meeting, we made some corrections. The number one, I feel like I'm on a game show, the number one problem that I heard was the potential that this bylaw would be used to impose somebody's sense of taste on a property. Didn't like the color, didn't like other features. And so you will see in Section 1 of this proposed bylaw, 2 sentences added. This bylaw is to be implemented to prevent immediate threats or to alleviate present conditions that pose risks to public health, safety, and welfare. This bylaw shall not be implemented with respect to aesthetics of any property. Second, there was a concern about snowbirds. That is, what if somebody is temporarily away from the property? I think the bylaw took care of that on its own, but for this bylaw, you will see, and this is at page 2 of the proposal, it reads, a building shall not be abandoned if one of the following circumstances exist, and then item number 4, the owner or lawful occupant is temporarily absent from the property, such as for the winter months. This bylaw for enforcement for abandonment would not apply if the property was secured. Why? That's the purpose of the bylaw. We have buildings that are safe and secure. Another issue was for servicemen, someone who's in service, in military service stationed abroad. Well, there's a balance there, and this proposal balances that the property could be brought to a safe and secure area under the bylaw, but action for a lien could not go forward while the serviceman was overseas. In that way, the community interest is protected, but further action has to wait until the serviceman came home. Those are the major changes from the last time. And again, the purpose is to make sure that we can do what we do what we can do to give our police, fire, and building inspector and Board of Health the tools they've asked for. This came from staff to help make our town a better place to live in. And so that when we drive through the town, we don't see building, and you know and I know, if you drove from Route 24, up 139 into the square, I believe you would pass perhaps 6 buildings that would qualify for treatment under this bylaw. 6 buildings on the main street through the town. All right? So that's what I ask you to do, and any questions I can answer, I'd be happy to do. Give us the tool to bring the town up. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Which you've used 5.5 minutes. And the floor is open. Mr. Hanson.
I have some real I will say this to my opening remarks, and I'll try to be brief. Yes, there's some abandoned properties in this town, and in fact, there's one right next to me. And there's rock manufacturing across from the Hanson School. There's several places that really need addressing, I will say that. However, this particular article, for instance, the previous speaker had said that it carved out an exemption for basically the snowbirds, but I don't see that in there. It shall not be abandoned. And if we'll say the building is unsecured, because they went down to Florida, went in a nursing home or something else, and the building became unsecured, they would have no way of knowing that, but they would fall within the confines of this law and subject to penalty. We spent a great deal of time defining a dilapidated building, and the definition is pretty good, but then we nowhere in this does it address a dilapidated building. It just says abandoned building. And fining people and potentially confiscating the property without due process, I have a real problem with that. This bylaw, this article does not properly address, I think, the problems that need addressing, but I at least will say this to the previous speaker, that I congratulate him in his effort to address these problems.
Mr. Scardino.
Joe Scardino, Precinct 1. There are 3 main ways that you can lose your property. You cannot pay your taxes, you cannot pay your mortgage, or if you commit a crime, you can go through a process called civil forfeiture. The difference between those 3 and this bylaw is 2 words: due process, separation of powers, jurisdictional separation. The bylaw reminds me, with the clerk's hearing provision for the adjudication of this problem, to going to Bank of America's legal department for your mortgage foreclosure proceeding. There needs to be a much more of a respect. It's in the Constitution. The due process is preserved as an inalienable right. But this particular bylaw makes the clerk the final arbiter of the determination. The clerk, as far as I'm concerned, may be able to do her job, but she's not an attorney, not a member of the bar. These are legal proceedings. It's very serious to lose your property. It's been taken seriously by our forefathers. Again, like the previous speaker, I respect the the intentions of the draftsman of this provision, but I cannot support something that takes property without due process, and I hope that you vote this down.
Mr. Moderator, may I respond to that point?
Mr. O'Regan.
Thank you.
Very briefly.
The determination by a municipal official, including the town clerk in this circumstance, is always subject to judicial review. The bylaw applies to the procedure within the town of Stoughton. It does not provide what a resident of Massachusetts or a citizen of the United States may do otherwise. So within our town government, it spells out what our town government makes available. If a property owner is dissatisfied with a decision by the town clerk, the property owner, as a property owner has in every situation, a right to appeal, in this case, to the Superior Court under General Laws, Section 249, Section 4. So the previous speaker I disagree with. There is a right to judicial review. There is due process available. It is within this proposed bylaw, Mr. Moderator, the process for proceeding to the town clerk is intended to be an expedited, quick administrative review so that people can get their business handled quickly and not run into the expense, time, and burden of going through another committee and another board. It is a determination as to whether a property is vacant or abandoned. That's it. And if somebody believes their property is not vacant or abandoned based on an appeal, then they can take that decision to a Superior Court judge and have a decision. There is judicial review. This is not a denial of due process or an attempt at a taking without due process. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Lurie.
David Lurie, Precinct 6. There's a very old expression. I remember it as a kid. It's, the road to you-know-where is paved with good intentions. And this is loaded with great intentions. Who wouldn't want a beautiful town? Who wouldn't want to get rid of blight? Lawyers can't just write a law and just make the blight go away with just a stroke of a pen. We can't just vote to say, gee, wouldn't it be nice to have a great town? Let's sign a law that says we will now have a great town. It doesn't work like that. The way it works is you clear the way for business to come in when the climate's right to take over these abandoned buildings. That's how it's done. The economy's been in the dump for I don't know how many years. It's just trying to claw its way back. And what do? We lay a bunch of regulations on individuals and businesses. It's not the climate that you want to invigorate the community by drawing individuals to live here, to work here. It's a bad idea. You just can't just sign off to make your town look good. It just doesn't work that way. It's not realistic, and I'm sorry I'm voting against this.
Mr. DeFelice.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. What a great idea. Let's enable the town of Stoughton to crush our citizens on the lowest rung of the economic ladder. Do you really think that people want their properties to be run down and abandoned? I don't think so. I think we should have some empathy for our neighbors that may be elderly, disabled, widows, widowers, probably living on Social Security. Probably the only thing they have is that house, but they can't afford, once they pay for their taxes and so forth, they can't afford to do these things that the proponent would like them to do. Now, it's easy for people that are drawing salaries of 6 figures to say, gee, this is not a problem, blah, 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 blah. But there are people in this town, and I think there was some figures that were very surprising when they were doing the master plan of how many people in the town are below the poverty level. Also, there's a cottage industry that deals with this problem. And no matter where you go, whether it be Stoughton, Canton, wherever, these types of properties are being bought by individuals that rehab them, rebuild them, take them down, and start from scratch. Commonly called flipping. And some of these homes come up pretty well. I think there's a member on the board that has one being rehabbed beside his, one of his properties, for example. And personally, I've been involved in a couple of these rehabs, and currently involved with one now, working for individuals that are doing some of this work. The one that we're involved with, the person is doing one on Washington Street in Canton. So the point is that there's a marketplace out there that takes care of this for us. As far as needing extra powers, don't tell me the police department can't go in and deal with these issues of vagrants and so forth. Don't tell me the fire department can't go out and put an X on a house or a building, which means the department will not enter that building. We've seen it. It's been done in this town before. It's done everywhere. And if it's a health issue, you have the Board of Health. That's part of their job. So we have plenty of opportunities from the existing departments, including the building inspector. One of the problems is you put a law into place like this, and the current building inspector I have a lot of respect for, and I don't think that he would come down on people unnecessarily. But do you all remember the previous building inspector? Oh, would he love this? He would be crucifying everybody, not just the people that have signs.
Personalities in it.
And we, you'll be old someday.
You got 1 minute going.
Thank you. And if a person hasn't got the funds or ability to upgrade the property, how is he going to afford these fines? Are you kidding me? It's not going to happen. And we talked about due process being the clerk's office. Are you kidding me? You think that would stand up to the Fourth Amendment test? He's the lawyer, I'm not, but I know that would not stand up.
It would.
I don't think so. But I'm not an attorney, I'm sorry. And lastly, are there going to be a special category for places like the Reynolds Farm? No one lives there. Or will there be a different schedule for the properties on the YMCA property, which has an abandoned barn and another building?
Mr. DeFelice.
So, yes, sir.
You've hit 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mitchell.
Steve Mitchell, Precinct 8. I spent 14 years on the zoning board, and I was a member of and the chairman of the charter review, so I've had a few bylaws over the years. The problem with this bylaw, I said it last year and it was never resolved, is there's no reason for this bylaw to be mentioning vacant buildings. It should be abandoned and dilapidated buildings. That's mostly what it reads anyway. If you go to the second page, we're all over dilapidated. We're over here, we're talking about abandoned. The purpose mentions that we need to get these houses that are vacant filled. Well, it's America. People want to leave a house vacant and they keep it up. What's it the town of Stoughton to tell them what to do? So the bylaw should be reading regulations of abandonment and dilapidated buildings. Now, when you get a little bit further, and you get to page 13, we get back and we talk about vacant buildings, what they are. And if there's nobody living in a residential building, it is considered vacant. Okay, so that's what the bylaw says. So if you go to page 14, you go to registration, and it says if it's vacant for more than 90 days, you shall register on the next page on the chart on page 15. So if the house sits vacant and it's vacant and is in good shape, even if the building inspector goes over, which he has a section to go over, you still have to register. Now, I have my mother's house. I talked about this last time. She died in March. Now, I'm still probating that, and if the probate doesn't work out, somebody challenges it, or the title's bad, I might hold on to this house for 3 years and end up paying $1,500 because the bylaw says I have to. It doesn't say the building inspector can make a evaluation that he likes me and it's a vacant building, but I don't have to pay it. The bylaw says right here on page 14 that I shall register it and pay the money, starting at $100 all the way up to $1,500. I don't know why the vacant part is still in this bylaw. I brought this up last year. And as far as the clerk is concerned, I don't think she knows anything about building. I don't know why she should be reviewing this in front of people. Obviously, that's not going to work too well for the people that own the houses. And the rest of it is, if they decide that the building inspector, you don't register, then he can charge you $300,000 to $9,000 a day for not registering your house, even though it's just vacant. So depending upon, like, you're not going to like it, one of the previous members said that one of the last building inspectors we had that used a lot of things against people. This would not be good. We need to go back and change this bylaw to read abandoned and dilapidated buildings. Vacant buildings have nothing to do with it. As long as they're maintained and they're in good shape, anybody should be able to keep a vacant building any way they want. Most commercial buildings are only vacant because they can't find people to rent them. This bylaw, as written, and the vacant part of it was never changed. It's going to cost a lot of people a lot of money that you people are not intending to cost money. So I think we should go back. I said it last year. I would help anybody that wanted to try to write it to the best of my ability and change this to read. I'm not sure what town this came from, but it's not written the proper way as I would like it intended. I'd like those buildings taken down across from the Hanson School. I talked about that last year. It's not getting done. We passed a bylaw last year involving residences. I don't know why Mr. Reagan's saying we didn't. So don't vote for this if you think you're going to have a building that's vacant for a while. And there's no reason in the world for this bylaw to be representing vacant buildings as long as they're maintained well. Thank you.
Mr. Ventresco.
Peter Ventresco, Precinct 8. I got a page full of stuff here, but it was already mentioned ahead of time. But the building inspector here? Yeah.
Mr. McGrath,
Do you have the authority of the town or in your department to do most of what they're requesting here?
I don't have any more authority than is in the state
what?
building code at the moment. I think that if this article were to pass, it gives me additional authority.
Yeah, but basically you could do something without this particular article as far as condemning a house.
My ability to do something is really restricted to if it's dangerous, I can initiate a condemnation process, at which point the town, at their own expense, could demolish the building and then lien the property and hope to get the money back at a later date when the property changed hands.
Okay.
I think what the intention of this is to give, as I mentioned at the Finance Committee, is to give me more tools to deal with the kind of property, the abandoned property, the foreclosed property, that's clear that nobody's living in them, that they're not habitable, and they're not being maintained. And I would also say that I think that the fear that myself or my successor is going to run amok with this thing and be citing, people whose property is vacant because they're in Florida or because whose parents have recently died, I think is preposterous.
Jesus, I lost my train of thought here. Another question here. Let's see, houses about the towns. All right, and, okay, one of the other things, if I think of it, I'll get back to you. But anyways, some of the other things here, like, I forget what page it's on, it says, building having dilapidated weather protection such as paint or stain. Now, just because a house doesn't have paint or stain on, a lot of people put up cedar shingles and just let it weather for the next 50 years.
No one is going to cite a building that needs a paint job if it's legally occupied and being
Well,
used
the-
and
the-
is not unsecure. I think this fear
that,
somehow.
that line should be taken out of there then.
Let him- That's correct. That's not a point of order. I'm going to tell you that's not a point of order. That's a point of interruption. I know it. You've already taken away some of Mr. Ventresco's time.
Hey, the clock isn't still running on me, is it?
Yes, the clock is still running.
I don't want any interruptions. All right, I noticed in the wintertime, a lot of these streets, some of the main streets in Stoughton, elderly people have poly outside their windows to seal the drafts because they can't afford new windows. So, and sometimes they might not be able to afford to have their grass cut because they're too old themselves, so their grass gets higher, so that becomes a problem then. And
You got 45,
we're
42
gonna
seconds.
evict them. The fees, I think, are exorbitant. And then somebody mentioned before, there's a process, if your house is taken, you can take it all the way to the Supreme Court. How many people in this audience got the money and hire lawyers to go all the way to the Supreme Court? Pardon?
You have 17 seconds left.
All right,
Mr.
I guess I'm
Ventress.
done. I'm going to vote against this. I hope everybody else does too. And plus, you wonder why town meetings takes too long? These are the same articles coming back year after year. We voted out last year, voted out again today.
Mr. Moderator, brief response to the previous speaker?
No. 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 We've had your 5. Mr. Coleman.
Eric Coleman, Precinct 5. I do think something should be done. I'm not sure that this is what should be done, but anyway, there are some small things that looks like it should be corrected here. On the sheet given to us, Article 13, the handout, on page 2, number 3, it talks about attempting to rent, lease. I would want to add in there, or sell. If you're trying to sell your house, it's equivalent to that, and yes, your house can be vacant, but secured. So that is 2 words. You wouldn't give me paper to write it on, so whatever. The second
Mr. Moderator,
item,
may I accept that as a friendly amendment?
yes, you may. Second item. On
All right,
the-
could you repeat, please? See, we haven't even finished this thing yet.
All right, after,
You're talking very quickly, Mr. Coleman.
I'll talk very quickly.
What do you?
On page 2.
Page 2 of
Number
this.
3, second line, after rent, comma, or sell. Make it rent, comma, sell.
You're talking Part B?
3, the building is empty of tenants.
Yes.
But the owner, well, in the second line, in attempts to rent, sell, or lease. Just put in sell,
Yeah.
comma, sell. Is there any, do people understand this? Any confusion in that?
If it's a.
Okay, we got it.
You got
The
it.
second item, and that was friendly, and we accept that. on page 15 on the original warrant. I had mentioned this last
All
time.
right, I'm gonna have to say, at this stage of the game, this is getting wieldy in that sense. So these are points that if you don't want to.
We all want it. We don't want cell in there? No, I didn't mean the article.
I can't speak for
I mean
you.
the cell
I'm
part.
only speaking.
Number 3.
I know,
I understand that.
we're getting feisty here.
All right, before my time runs out.
All right, let it.
Page 15. I mentioned this last time. Under fees, $200. Vacant for less than 1 year. Add to that, but over 90 days, because the first $100 is the first 90 days. You want to see that?
Yes, I remember that coming up. However, this is a fault of the thing, and I'm going to highly recommend that you dispose of this in the proper manner.
Can you accept that as being friendly?
I'm not going to accept it because these people don't know. We're moving papers and notes and everything else.
Meeting members have done all I can do.
Mr. Feaster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Joseph Feaster, Precinct 4. I want to speak to this from the standpoint, I've heard all the previous speakers, but those who know me know I deal strictly with the facts. And the facts on this particular matter are, the facts on this particular matter is simply stated as to what this bylaw is attempting to do. And as was said by the previous speaker, talked about some of the condition of property in this town. This has nothing to do with taking away anyone's inalienable rights. This has nothing to do with taking away anyone's rights in order to dispute what may be made by the town. What this is simply doing, whether you talk about dilapidated, whether you talk about vacant, whether you talk about abandoned, I ask people to read before you come up here to the microphone and make these assertions, these baseless assertions, which are not stated within the document. I ask you to read Section A, abandoned buildings, and it says the building is not occupied for a period of 90 days. A building shall not be abandoned if certain circumstances exist. That is, if there's an active permit, if there is a building that is empty of tenants but the owner or agent is engaged in attempting to rent or lease the premises, is on page 12. The owner of the premises is in military service. What we're talking about are those persons who are not boarding up their properties and not taking care of it. And if you're not taking care of your property, then fine. Then you should put it up for sale. But we should not be suffering within the town with circumstances where persons aren't taking care of their property. That's all that this does. It says if you're taking care of your property, these putting in all of these fearful things of, I'm in Florida. Come on, folks, let's be serious. Talking about, oh, if I'm in Florida, I'm a vacant building. We're not talking about vacant. We're talking about, I practice real estate law. I do development. And what I'm saying, and what this article and this warrant says, is that if you're not taking care of your property, you have it such, and not from the way that it looks, you are affecting public safety, you are jeopardizing the work of our firemen and policemen, you are taking a situation where vagrants are taking care of the property, you have all type of venom and disease that could be in the property simply because it's not taken care of. If you board up your property, you don't come within this provision, this warrant should pass.
Mrs. Cardozo.
Teresa Cardozo, Precinct 7. I agree with Mr. Feaster, but I'd like to make a comment. I work in the treasurer's office as a delinquent tax clerk. We had one property that was vacant, abandoned, rats, a cat hanging dead in the back of it. It was a terrible property. The neighbors complained constantly and called us. The owners and the heirs donated gave up the rights. They didn't donate it, they gave up the rights. It took us almost 10 years to get through this property, to go through the tax taking because it was so much work and get the foreclosure. The money that was spent, we almost didn't even get it back when we auctioned the house. Now it's auctioned off and it's a beautiful home and it's being sold to a family. The point is, the town is not looking to get anyone out of their homes. We're looking to get these people who have vacant, abandoned, messy properties with, animals running in and out. We constantly are getting phone calls from neighbors. If you're a neighbor and you have that going on in your home, or you have vacant, a parcel, you're not going to like it. I don't know about all the logistics of it. There may be, tweaks that need to be done, and I understand that. But at the end of the day, we have had many monies spent that could have been taken easily instead of going through the courts and costing us so much money. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Good evening. Previous speakers talked about the crux of this and what is important. And what's really important is, if you look at all fees, it's all about the money. $9,000 a day they can charge you, the owner. I'm sorry?
Come closer to the mic.
Oh, use the microphone? All right, I'll use the microphone. They can charge up to $9,000 a day this is all about the money. It's not about the buildings. They don't even know how many buildings are in town that are, do you? Do you know how many buildings are abandoned in town, sir? No. There's been no inventory.
They'd have to be registered if they're vacant. This will give us the ability to develop an inventory.
So you're going to charge them to register and then put a sticker on the building to say that it's been registered?
Yes.
Yes, and then and if they don't register, you're going to charge them up to $9,000 a day. So it's all about the money. It's fees.
It's not all about the money, sir.
Well, that's what it looks like in here.
Mr. Murphy.
Move the question.
That is to cut off debate. As this is okay, I forgot one thing. All those in favor of cutting off debate, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Good. On this motion, I'm definitely not reading every word of it. It is to amend the general bylaws by adopting the proposed new bylaw called Chapter 173, Regulation of Vacant and Abandoned Properties, as printed in the warrant and with the revisions per this memorandum that was distributed this evening. And I maintain that that is a legitimate appendage, and we don't have to go further about suspending the rules. Yeah. Which, now, just make sure, I didn't vote on it, no. And this is only a general bylaw. It requires a majority vote. If I'm in doubt, I will, of course, have a standing count. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. I would say it's significantly lost. And that it is now 10:09. Yes. Anytime they go through the proper procedures, the only restriction on a bylaw that sets a time limit is a zoning bylaw which has come back without the approval of the planning board. It could come back next week if we had a town meeting next week. Mr. Feaster.
Mr. Moderator, I stand as a point of order. I challenge the moderator's determination on that vote and ask for its standing count.
What's that? Do I have 7 people to challenge? Okay. All those in favor, please rise, and the chairman take account. It's always good to have the record. Precinct 1, yes.
4.
Precinct 1 is 4. Precinct 2.
5, I'm sorry, make that 5.
Come on. It's 5. So what do you want, George? 5. Okay. Precinct 2 is 5. You're not borrowing now. Now, precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 4. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 7. Precinct 11. The acoustics are not very good in this. Precinct 5, Mr. Cole. Precinct 5 has 6. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 has 4. Precinct 7. 7 is 4. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 2. All those opposed, please rise.
2, 3, 4, 5.
Precinct 1.
6.
Precinct 1 is 6. Precinct 2.
14.
Precinct 2 is 14. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 6. Precinct 4. 6. Precinct 5. Precinct 5 has, how many noes have you got, Eric? 3? Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 9. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 2. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 7. 5 has 2. Abstention. Six, 3, and 2. Okay, how do we fare? It is yes 41, no 53, and 2 abstention. The motion is lost. Now, okay. What time did I do that? Let me do a couple. What do you got, 10:15? 10:14. What's that? I got to make some explanations here. First of all, the protocol with CPA articles requires that CPA, the Community Preservation Committee, approve of any and have a vote of having an agreement or agree with the decisions of the Finance Committee. Now, the Finance Committee, as far as borrowing, it's a very complicated thing here. If the Finance Committee can disapprove what the CPA has, but they can not change the appropriations or the intent of the CPC with the community preservation funds. It is also, both committees have to make a report. Now, we've given plenty of time, and I don't know what the complications were with correspondence between the Community Preservation Committee. I do know that they had a meeting. They did vote their things. Now, this comes under that rule number 4. And Mr. Morton is the chairman of the committee, and he has rushed back and hoped that we talked long enough on the other article to get this copy into your hands, which is their version of what they would like voted. Now, I'm going to ask Mr. Morton to come to the microphone before I accept anybody's motion, to explain what is different between what the Finance Committee has. And I understand it's very minuscule, but I just want to be sure that you two are in agreement of what is to be before us. So just highlight what is different between...
Mr. Moderator, through you, the motion that you have as a handout basically contains all the information that was available to the Finance Committee, I believe, except that we had to have special language in it that makes it clear that we're borrowing under CPA funds, and we included specific statements with respect to the preservation of the affordable covenants in the handout that you have. We didn't want to leave it to chance. So the motion that you have in front of you deals with all of the specifics that I'm sure were presented to the Finance Committee. However, we want the vote from town meeting to be clear. And what I'd like to do, Mr. Moderator, is move it as in the handout and then walk you through each piece of the handout so we don't have to read this whole thing, which you won't pay any attention to anyway. So I would like to make a motion that we approve the motion as
Could I
set.
interrupt you a minute, Mr. Morton? Do you have a couple more copies of this for us people up here?
That was handed
We
out.
need- we need
The
all-
town clerk needs to have a copy, you need to be the keeper of records, the attorney needs one, the moderator needs one, and I need one. Sorry.
No, that's...
There really is nothing new in this motion. It is just makes explicit the conditions that were considered by both the Community Preservation Committee and the Finance Committee. May I make the motion, Mr. Moderator?
All right. In other words, yours is the legal thing that you can go with based as your knowledge as chairman of the Community Preservation Committee and as attorney dealing with the negotiations. I will rely that you can make that motion first, and that will be the motion that we will vote on.
Yes. I move.
Then I'm going to allow Mr. Do you want to make the motion? What they have.
Actually, through you, Mr. Moderator, we would defer to the chair of the CPA for their motion.
Go ahead.
All right, Mr. Moderator, I move the motion set in the handout, which I will explain very quickly each salient point. So I move the motion that you have in your hands. The motion calls, there's now discussion, Mr. Moderator?
Explain it. Go ahead.
The motion calls for $350,000 of CPA funds allocable to the housing component of the CPA fund. As you know, there are three components: housing, conservation and open space, and historic preservation. These funds would be allocated from the housing point. The funds are to be used for the rehabilitation of the housing, 110 units at Presidential Courts here in Stoughton, 223 Pearl Street. These units have been here in Stoughton for over 40 years. They count against the 10% housing requirement, minimum requirement, established by the Massachusetts Housing Department. So that as we went through the planning for the CPA, we got strong public feedback that what we should do is preserve existing qualified affordable housing units. And that weighed heavily in the decision of the CPA. These funds are to be used as a matching grant. You may recall we approved at the last town meeting $1.8 million for the creation of 20 new affordable units at Swan's Tavern. Here, we can preserve 110 units. If these units were lost, we would potentially fall below the 10% ratio that is required, and therefore, we would be ripe for 40Bs and other things that can be put in regardless of our bylaws and our zoning laws. We have imposed conditions on this. First, that these funds will not be advanced until the presidential courts demonstrates to the satisfaction of the Board of Selectmen that it has received $3.5 million in funds from other sources to basically fund what is a $5 million rehabilitation project. Second, that they must establish to the satisfaction of the Board of Selectmen that these units will continue to be included in the affordable housing count for Stoughton. And third, they must record in the Registry of Deeds confirmation of the restricted covenant for at least 40 years following the vote of town meeting. The funds may be used in general for the rehabilitation of the units. These units were created, I don't know, 40 years or so ago. Mr. Viola will give more information. They have been preserved, and they have been basically kept up as best they could through their own revenues and income, and they have created a little bit of a surplus to apply against this renovation. But like your house, you cannot not have major capital repairs after a period of 40 years. Roofs go, windows collapse, doors need to be replaced, and so on. If we lose these units, they will become market rate, and they will come
Mr.
off
Martin, just
the
for-
affordable.
Mr. Martin, just for a second. You in favor of having your time extended?
All right.
All those in favor of extending his time?
Aye.
All those opposed? It carries. It carries.
I don't have much more to say. I will say this. There is some resistance to the fact that this is a for-profit corporation. Let me tell you, that is really what it is it's a Massachusetts Domestic Profit Limited Equity Corporation. What this means is that the people who rent these apartments at a subsidized rate own a % interest in the building. I want to make it clear that in determining whether they would maintain the affordable rate or basically take their money and run, they learned that there isn't much money to take in a company like this. They could not replace the units that they have for the kind of money that they would make by selling their units. In other words, this isn't a very profitable thing for the people who live there. It's affordable housing. They pay into it rent. The rent is used to keep the building up as much as possible, but it doesn't cover the kind of capital costs that are required. So the CPC felt that it was in absolutely the best interest of this town to approve $350,000 against a $5.5 million project to protect and preserve 110 affordable units in the town.
Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin, Town Council just wants to make a request from you. I do need for the records.
I'm sorry?
I do need for the records the date of the meeting that you took the vote and the vote by the CPC.
Was that November 3rd? Yeah. We had...
We need that in the records.
No, so that was an October date, was, Mr. Moderator, through you to Mr. Scardino, do you remember the date of that meeting? I mean, we don't have the minutes of the meeting with us, I'm sorry to say, but we can confirm it. It was in late October.
Here's what I will do. If you have somebody from...
October 30. You're meeting the same day as the Finance Committee downstairs. October 30.
Okay, October 30, 2014.
10:30, okay. 2014, we will definitely...
3-0. Yep.
I'm instructed to tell you that it was a unanimous vote of the CPC at that time.
And we will ask you somewhere to produce a written record. I'm going to call this a recess session for them to straighten that out. This means they're just here and not doing anything until they straighten this mess out. It's better to take 3 minutes. It's better to take the 3 minutes here than to take 30 to 60 more days to. Council is.
The town council has advised me to add the language where it says the recording in the appropriate registry of deed, a restriction by the applicant in form acceptable to the Board of Selectmen. So adding the words, that's at the top paragraph before the white space, before the first white space.
Mr. Moore, it's to authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept the restriction.
Oh, I see.
You can just add it to the end and authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept the restriction.
Okay.
I would like to remind everyone here that this is, and I'm not going to be critical, there was a very, very tight time schedule.
I'm sorry for the delay. We have been circulating this motion for the last 2 weeks, and the language that we have to add is that the form of restriction is accepted by the Board of Selectmen. Okay, authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept the 40-year restriction.
Yes.
So that's what it will say, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept the 40-year restriction before it's recorded in the Registry of Deeds.
To accept. And record. Accept 40-year restriction.
This opinion
Restriction.
I got from Joe Fair.
I'll let you guys work that out. All right. I see some people have some questions. Mrs. Carrara.
Stephanie Carrara, Precinct 2. For my first question is, I'd like to know what the 40B count is as of today. What is our percentage? Are we over the 10%?
Who has that information?
Noreen O'Toole, Town Planner. The current 40B count is 11.4%.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, to the Town Planner, is presidential courts included in that count?
Yes, it is.
When does it come off the rolls?
You know, I don't have the exact date. They contacted me about 6 months ago that said that date was coming up. So it has to be within, I'd say, the next 6 months that they would totally be off. Someone here may have that exact date.
We have Mr. Dan Violi.
Selectman O'Regan just reminded me that they're on a 2-year extension program.
So without that 2-year extension, they would have been off?
Yes.
So they are currently not, although the town of Stoughton does not own those right now?
No, we do not.
Thank you.
You're
This is what I'm upset about right now, is that I wasn't for the CPC funds and not getting that tax. We got it. We were told that it would be for town-owned property, not this over here, not a theater. And I'm not saying that I'm not willing to help, but we were told one thing. They're using the CPC funds for things, a vast majority. I'll leave it at that. And what's also upsetting is, as I sit up here and I help the town clerk take notes, I know I was told, and I think some of the people in this room were told, that we needed to have things to everyone 30 hours before anyone makes a vote. That's not happening. This is unacceptable. And I'm going to tell you why. Because not only can we not make an accurate vote, but we have people that come to the clerk's office and say, I want this. We're sorry, we don't have that because we have to wait to the next town meeting till we get everything. When you are presenting an article, there will be amendments. That is human nature. However, this, you want money? Have your stuff all together so we can make accurate votes and the town clerk can have the accurate minutes. Because we don't have access to the town webpage, we can't put the minutes up for everyone to see. So everyone comes to us. People get it together because we're the ones that are getting screamed at because the stuff is not online and it is not accurate. 30 hours. It's not 30 hours. Howie complained about not getting something a day in advance. How do we make an accurate vote? I just want someone to explain that to me. You can. Thank you.
Mr. DeFelice.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I believe that most of the 40Bs that we've gotten over the last several years, I believe all the units are in perpetuity. And this one, we're talking 40 years. Why is that the case? Why aren't these going to be in perpetuity like the other 40Bs? I'd like an answer to that question. Because it says we're only going to get 40 years. I'm not asking you, I'm asking someone that has the knowledge of that.
Mr. Violi can answer that.
Well, excuse me, Mr. Moderator. I don't think he's the person who ought to answer the question. My question was, and someone questioned me that whether the 40Bs that we have are in perpetuity. I think that is correct. And the reason I'm asking this question is, if that is the case, and if that's what we require from 40Bs, all the other 40Bs, why is this guy skating on this?
Mr. Morton, could you answer that?
Yes, I can. Excuse me. Sure. Thank you. The 40Bs are required to be in perpetuity. This is not a 40B. This is a domestic corporation. It is 40 years because when these things come up for funding, if they were perpetual, they would have a hard time getting grants from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to support them. So every 40 years, when any physical property needs complete renovation, they can go to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and ask for matching grants. And without that leverage, they won't get the matching grants. Without that leverage, we would lose these as affordable housing units.
Mr. DeFelice.
So we're looking for 350 grand. Someone said it's about 110 units, so we're paying approximately $3,500 per unit to have those stay as is. Kind of an expensive proposition, I think. Also, I'd like to know, if, I don't know, I guess to the town planner, on the Woodbridge project, which is an approved subdivision. It is an approved subdivision.
Let's just talk.
I want to know from the planner what that would provide to our account.
Mrs. O'Toole.
That is estimated at approximately 140 units, that particular project. But that is really right now in limbo. That's not part of any count yet. The units aren't counted until they receive a building permit. So right
Okay.
now, we don't see that in any of the counts.
Right. But we just heard about a 2-year extension, so there's a good chance that that's going to happen in the next 2 years with the economy picking up. The thing that really bothers me about this, I feel that the town of Stoughton is being blackmailed. And the reason why I say that is we're basically being held hostage to this situation where someone comes along and says, well, if you don't do it our way, we're going to pull these units off the rolls. But if you give us the money to do these items, we'll keep them on the rolls for you. I don't like being blackmailed. And I don't like the idea that I have to worry about someone's roof when many of us in this room, who paid for your roof when you had to fix it? Who paid for your windows when you had them replaced? You did. You did. You didn't come up to this rostrum and say, I need $3,000 to put some doors and windows in, or I need $20,000 to fix a roof. You took your own responsibility and did it yourself. Now, these people had responsibility over the period of years to make sure the monies were appropriated and funded to take care of their maintenance. What the hell are we being asked for? To maintain someone else's home? We have enough problems doing our own. This is patently a blackmail. I'm sorry.
Mr. Lurie.
Okay, David Lurie, Precinct 6. The way I looked at this article, it kind of reminded me back when I was a kid. I grew up in Connecticut, and we had a street in our town. It was called Tremper Drive. It was affordable housing just like this. The people didn't own the property. They were subsidized. It was subsidized housing. And the place turned into a wreck. It was the place in town nobody would allow their kids to go into because it was dangerous and everything else. And then something interesting happened. I had since moved out, and I go back to visit the town I grew up in, and it's interesting that the town made a conscious decision to break the chain of having people subsidized and actually cut a deal with those people that had a hard time affording homes and made it so they could actually own it. Now, the previous speaker mentioned that these people have this equity. They actually get these improvements. They have the value of that property. They own it while they live there, but they can't break out of there. They're not allowed to say, I'm going to sell this property to somebody behind me who needs affordable housing. You can't do that. You only get the value of your home as long as you live based on the help that you're getting from others to make sure your property doesn't fall apart. So what I'm trying to say is that hometown story that I was saying is that they said, you guys can own your own property. You own it. You can make out, a purchase and sale agreement and sell that property to somebody. And what was happening is that the property started to improve. So I don't really look at this as being like, gee, how much out of our pocket today is it going to cost us to make sure that these people get another 40 years? It's just the whole model is broken in that when we shovel money to them and they get this free handout and they're locked in for 40 years or they can't give that property up, guess what? The property's just going to keep sliding downhill because they don't have a vested interest in improving it. They don't have any equity in that property. You give them the hope that they could possibly put in a new door, improve the windows, put in a roof. Hey, maybe I can put together a deal, sell this, move on to something else, and move on up into society with a better property. That's what happened in the town I grew up in. It worked. The homes are all turning beautiful. It has nothing to, even after you get past this vote, you still have these people who are now depending on us to every 40 years subsidize them so they could have these dilapidated properties after, let's say, 20 years. From 20 to 40, the properties are a joke. So it's really not the fact that we have to shell out money today. It's the fact that we're locking these people into misery for another 40 years. We should be looking at ideas that break this model so that people could own their own property, and then they start to take care of them. Then we don't have these kind of eyesores in town. That's why I'm voting this down.
I think if I could just respond, I think if you look at the numbers, I think that this project at 110 in the end does not impact the town of Stoughton as a Woodbridge development would at between 145 and 180 units. If you would lose this project and have to rebuild it, and you started to say Woodbridge came, it went into foreclosure and say someone actually bought it and started to develop it, that would be a far greater impact on our school system than what's happening right now if we were to lose the presidential court units.
Mr. Violi. Mr. Violi is counsel for presidential courts.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and good evening, town meeting members. I am not counsel to presidential courts. I wish I was. I am an affordable housing development consultant. I've been developing affordable housing throughout the Commonwealth for about 35 years. I'm speaking on behalf of the Board of Directors and the officers of Presidential Courts of Stoughton, and a number of the board members are here. Sherry Jones, who's the president and has lived at Presidential Courts for 30 years. Julie Reed, who's the vice president, who's lived there for 4 years. Donna Daggett, the secretary, who has lived there for 30 plus years, and Bruce Richardson, who's the treasurer, who has lived there for 37 years. They are all intelligent people. They would not be living there for over 30 years if they were living in misery. I'd like to address a couple of comments that have been made, and ad hominem comments that are totally erroneous. Number one, the property is not in terrible shape. It is not crime-ridden. It is not a bad place to go. It's a wonderful place to go. It is fairly well maintained for the resources that the owner has to take care of it. The request that is before the CPC is not blackmail. In order to leverage some Commonwealth of Massachusetts funds to the tune of about $3.5 million, which would help with our capital improvement program, DHCD has a fundamental threshold requirement that if you apply for their funding, you must have a local match. That's what this is about. In order to submit an application, we did submit an application to DHCD, and it was turned down because we did not have a local match. At that time, we had a recommendation from the CPC, but we did not have town meeting approval. That is what we are seeking tonight, and that will allow us to reapply to DHCD and hopefully be awarded these funds. The board and the tenants are also pursuing about $1.25 million in new senior debt from a private commercial loan, from a bank for a first mortgage commercial loan for the property. That is not an indication that they are on the dole. It is an indication that their rents help pay for these improvements. Let me go back to some more general statements. We mailed out an informational letter to town meeting members. I hope you all received it. We have more copies up here if you did not. That gives an overview of the history of presidential courts. I'm not going to go through that history right now because it would take too much time. And it also gives you a very good profile of who lives there. And if you look at it, and if you look at the numbers, you'll see that economically it's a pretty diverse community, yet it can still qualify as affordable housing. Presidential Courts was built and occupied in the early 1970s, and since then it has been one of the most vital and important and well-used and well-respected affordable housing developments in the town of Stoughton. This effort is to keep it that way. So a vote in favor of this by town meeting will accomplish three very important goals. Number one, it will keep the property on the subsidized housing inventory, which we hope would help the town keep its percentage above 10%. It would be critical in hopefully getting an award from the Commonwealth for the bulk of the financing that we need, the $3.5 million plus the $1.25 million in bank financing. And it will help bring a very helpful and constructive capital improvement program to the property, which it is in need of, while at the same time keeping the rents affordable. One other comment about the tenants having no interest in this property. They do have an interest in this property. They all have a share in the corporation that owns the property. The type of corporation that it is called a limited equity cooperative, and that limited equity restricts the amount of return that they can see on that share. They do not receive an annual dividend. They do not receive any cash distribution for that share. What they see is that when they move in, they buy a share, and when they move out, they sell that share. For the time that they live there, the value of that share goes up a little bit each year. I think people who are living there for over 30 years, and there's a good number of residents who have lived there for that time, is testament to the fact that it's good, solid, affordable housing. Thank you very much. We would appreciate your support.
Yes, Mr. Blacker.
Jeff Blacker, Precinct 2, move to question.
That's a cut-off debate. I heard a second. All those in favor of cutting off debate say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries. as there's a borrowing involved in this, it will require a 2/3 vote, and I'm going to require that be a standing count. All those in favor, please rise, and the chairman take count. Precinct 1.
9.
Precinct 1 is 9. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 12. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 9. Precinct 4. 4 is 14. Precinct 5. Eric. What's your count? 9? Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 11. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 5. Precinct 8. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 6. All those opposed, please rise. Precinct 1.
2.
Precinct 1 is 2. Precinct 2. Precinct 2 is 3. Precinct 3. Precinct 3 is 0. Precinct 4. Precinct 4 is 2. Precinct 5. 5 is 2. Precinct 6. Precinct 6 is 2. Precinct 7. Precinct 7 is 0. Precinct 8. Precinct 8 is 3. The motion carries. Yes, 75. No, 14. It is now 10:53. We have one article left. I recognize Mr. What's the point of order, Mr.? Yes, you do. You have a quorum. I recognize Mr. Joseph McCrisky, a member of the Board of Selectmen and Precinct 5, to read a letter from the Historical Commission.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I read this on behalf of the Stoughton Historical Commission, Dwight McCarran, petitioner of Article 15. As many of you know, in June 2014, the Historical Commission declared the Thomas Glover House at 480 Street historically significant and issued a 6-month demolition delay order. After opinions of 3 noted period home specialists affirmed the unique nature and value of the building, the owner, Mr. Samuel Shoney of 10 Ronald Street, has joined our efforts. He has agreed to temporarily extend the delay and pursue the possibility of giving the house and 15,000 square feet of land to the town if he is able to receive zoning variances to build 4 houses on the remaining land in the parcel. The Historical Commission will support Mr. Shoney's zoning request in an attempt to save this unique piece of the town's colonial past, and will develop more detailed suggestions for future uses of this house. We appreciate the support we have received from various concerned citizens and will need more of such support in the future. Details of the special qualities of the house, reasons it should be saved, and many photographs will be posted on the Historical Commission Town's website. In the next month, the Historical Commission will consider presenting a citizen's petition or request more definitive direction article to be placed on the warrant for the annual town meeting. On behalf of the Historical Commission, it respectfully requests the town meeting approve the article to dismiss Article 15 of the November 10th, 2014 town meeting.
On the motion to dismiss, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion is dismissed. Now, for the one, Ms. Wall. All those in favor of staying here? See, I did it.
How are you? See you. I have a question. I think the timing is